Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Health Corner podcast. I'm your host, Atishay Jain, and in today's episode, we have yet another very special guest joining us today. Student athlete on the varsity men's golf team at Princeton University, Huang has done it all. He has won 2021 Ivy League Rookie of the Year, earned second team All Ivy League, has earned a second team All Ivy League honor, and has even co-led Princeton to the Ivy League championship. He has countless other achievements as well. Will graduated Phillips Exeter Academy in 2021 before continuing his golf career at Princeton. Aside from his success in golf, Will is a passionate advocate for mental health. He believes in the importance of spreading mental health awareness and advocates for individuals to have access to resources to seek help where needed. He recently started an organization called Birdies Towards Brightness, dedicated towards helping eradicate the stigma associated with seeking necessary guidance. Together today on this podcast, we will talk about Will's journey and path to being a high-performing student athlete and the stigma of mental health support that can be associated with individuals like him. Will, a very warm welcome to you today on the series, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to do this podcast and kind of share what I know and keep spreading the awareness.
Sounds good. Well, I gave a brief introduction about you, but if there's anything you'd like to add, feel free to go ahead. Otherwise, we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah, I just want to say I think my journey through mental health has been a little bit of a rocky road recently, and just kind of through starting Birdies Towards Brightness has kind of started with my journey of through mental health and as well as some of my teammates. So yeah, like earlier in the year, was going through some depressive episodes and when unfortunately ended up at Mount Sinai Beth Israel in the psychiatric ward in at the end of August, just before school started. Kind of that's when I realized that mental health is something very important. Just kind of before is something that I always brushed off. That was like, yeah, that's not something that affects me. Like it only affects people with with PTSD, like people that served in the military and stuff like that. I just didn't really pay much attention to it. But like stress from school, stress from athletics builds up. And unfortunately, I was admitted into inpatient care, but luckily we're a lot better now. So just kind of that was one of the main reasons why I decided to start Birdies Towards Brightness. And then unfortunately, during the school year, one of my teammates, close friends, actually passed away from suicide, and that just really helped trigger me to kind of build this foundation and this fundraiser called Birdies Towards Brightness. And we've done a lot of good work, but I think we're still striving to do better, trying to spread more awareness and doing more on-campus fundraisers at Princeton and just kind of making sure that the student athlete group is doing well in terms of the mental health aspect.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your stories about mental health.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
totally resonate with what you said. And according to some research I did, according to the NCAA, 30% of surveyed high-performing student athletes like yourself felt extremely overwhelmed, because they're almost balancing a second career outside of academics when it comes to playing on the field, playing on the course, and nearly 25% of them feel mentally exhausted as well. From your experiences being a student athlete at Princeton, what type of spaces do you believe that students athletes could be afforded with, which may help eradicate that stigma? Some sort of affinity spaces? I know briefly we had talked about before this podcast about some sort of affinity spaces on the Princeton campus and otherwise, but what do you think that students and adults can do alike to help spread this awareness, to help eradicate the stigma?
Yeah, for sure. I think just with mental health, just because it's relatively new, like not many people have been paying too much attention to it. Not like physical therapy where it's like you bang up your knee on the football field, like people know how to treat it. Mental health is still relatively new. There's I think especially now with how much stress that like an average student has to deal with in college. There's a lot of things that pile up mental health is very often overlooked, and especially for student athletes. Like, we have to with the constant travel, just going around on flights and then missing class and then having to make that up, is pretty stressful. But at the same time, it's a sacrifice that we're willing to make. That's part of the job description when we signed up to be Division I athletes, or just student athletes in general. So that doesn't take away, the severity of the stress that we go through. And I think on campus, like, it's definitely started to become more of a thing that the athletics department is focusing on, especially during the tough, like, weeks, midterms, finals week. There's definitely more opportunities and, like, more, resources for mental health, especially for general students and student athletes as well. But yeah, it's not something that, like, when you mention affinity spaces, it's not something that's very widespreadly available. And I'm currently working with the athletics department at Princeton, and kind of the deans to try and create some sort of affinity space where that can happen. Obviously we have a sports psychologist on campus, but a lot of the times, like, people don't feel comfortable sharing what they go through, like, daily struggles, with their sports psychologist. Just because sports psychologist is supposed to optimize how our brains function to perform the best at our sport, right? So instead of kind of learning how to handle the stress that we go through as a student and as, just a young adult in general. And so, like, just trying to build more of those spaces is definitely a goal in the future, I think, across all campuses, and especially something I'm striving for at Princeton.
Definitely. And it's important to note in Will's insights that high achieving Ivy League students and student athletes are no less susceptible to these mental health concerns such as depression, anxiety, etc. Many times I feel like there exists some sort of stigma and then they're not able to, seek the proper help that's necessary. So I found it interesting how you mentioned the sports psychologists and students not being able to feel comfortable sharing those type of, you know, mental health concerns that they may have. So what's the reason that you think that this is that struck me as particularly interesting?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of the similar, like, an analogy I could use is probably you wouldn't go to your sports doctor or, like, sports therapist about stuff that happened, like how you don't feel well. Um,
Mhm.
like, you feel congestion in your sinus, like, that's not what they're specifically trained for. As a sports psychologist, you're trained to optimize how an athlete is supposed to think on the course or on the sports field, in order to optimize their performance, athletically. Not really having to deal with other stuff is I think, from an athlete's perspective. Um, but obviously, our sports psychologist, Mike Gross, is awesome, and he's very well equipped to deal with kind of to go through daily stressors and stuff like that, and just to be able to talk with him is awesome. But I think, we only have a limited amount of time to work with Doc Gross, and we're always trying to, like, hey Doc, like, I'm for me as a golfer, like, when there's water on the left, like, I get nervous. Like, how do I fix that? Like, are there any methods that you can help, give me any pointers to, prevent those negative thoughts from coming in my head? And those are kind of the things that we focus on during those sessions, rather than, like, hey Doc, like, I just had a really stressful test last week. Didn't really feel good about it. A little frustrated, and a little down right now. That's, like, it's just kind of the difference, in material that we go through.
Right. Totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
do you think that if such like infinity spaces were to be available on a campus, that students would be more willing to like share their personal experiences and be vulnerable with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that we need to overcome, right? And
Mhm.
in this community is, that mental health affects everyone, very, very much so, and um, it's something that, happens to everyone. Everyone goes through times where they don't feel good, and it's okay to feel that way. And I think it's with, especially among high performing people, it might not seem like it's okay, right? Um, it might seem like it's super down when you're down, like that's not supposed to be happening, like that's not normal.
Mhm.
And you have to hide that away from everyone else when, in reality, a lot of people are going through this, and just kind of hiding it away and tucking away in the corner is not the way to deal with it. So
Right.
um, I think once we, get past that barrier, and have like, and people, like, you only need a select few to become vulnerable with everyone, and then everyone else will be like, hey, okay, that's okay to feel down. And it's okay to have bad moments, and to be able to share this is incredibly powerful.
Right.
So I think like something like group therapy is awesome, but but group therapy doesn't really work unless everyone in that space is willing to be vulnerable, and to connect with each other. And I think being vulnerable is the only way that we can connect among each other as humans. It's like a lot of times, that's how I connect with someone. It's now I understand who you are as a person, and just from you being vulnerable, I get to learn things about you that I would have never known, and now I can show sympathy, and understand how I could help you. So I think just getting past that is the absolute number one priority, and only from then on can we kind of start building affinity spaces, or like, having sessions, um like have speakers come in, and like then people would be open-minded to that stuff. But before we get rid of that negative stigma around mental health, it's very difficult to do so.
Right. Thank you so much for those insights. I think vulnerability, especially in today's adolescent world, we may find it really hard to like talk about such a sensitive subject of mental health with each other. However, as you mentioned, it just takes a few people to like talk to each other and listen to each other. I was actually talking to someone earlier today, and they said the most important thing that when it comes to mental health awareness is just to listen, just to listen what someone else has to say about their experiences. And many times you can resonate with what someone has to say. And I think it just goes a long way. So thank you so much for that. So moving on, as a student athlete, how do you balance your time on the golf course in the classroom? And then how do you take into account your mental health along the way?
Yeah, it's still definitely something that I'm still trying to work through. But I've done a much better job at it. Like, because obviously you have your classes, and then yeah, practice right afterwards, and then you're probably going to dinner or something after that, and then you're going to schoolwork. So it feels like very fast paced. There's not a time to take a break. Um, but I've something that I've started doing, is kind of like over the weekends. Like, we'll obviously have practice through the weekend. Um, we don't really have that much of an off day, really, just because we play both seasons, both in the fall and the spring. So I think one thing that I started doing, is like over weekends, like we'll have practice, and then after that, I don't do any schoolwork. I don't do anything. It's just one day for me to decompress, and like to absolutely drop the ball and everything, and not feel guilty about it. And
Mhm.
that's definitely helped a lot. It's definitely a technique that I've really enjoyed, and I think I've felt like that it's really helped benefit me,
Mhm.
um, as like coming out of depression, and it's been awesome. But
Mhm.
I think sometimes it's a little bit difficult, just kind of on your what you're depending on the schedule, like what time of the year. Like, obviously, it's very tough to do that during finals week or midterms week.
Right.
Like, especially during a time when we're competing, it's very brutal. Like, we'll have class, until Thursday, and then we fly out Thursday night and then we'll have practice around Friday, and then tournament Saturday, Sunday, and return
Mm,
back on, red eye from Sunday night to Monday morning, and you got to go back right back to class.
wow.
So it's sometimes it's very fast paced, but you
Right.
still have to find those, like, you just even find an hour, just to not do anything, and just kind of fully decompress from what you're doing, everything that you're doing, like whether it's practice, schoolwork, or extracurriculars, other stuff. But
Sure.
I think that time to yourself is super super valuable, and like for I remember my time at Exeter, like, oh my God, like I trying to play elite level golf, elite level junior golf, while also trying to go a very competitive boarding school. That was very tough, and like, and just kind of suppressing that and suppressing my need to take a break is definitely caught up to me, and is definitely something that needs to be part of it too. Like, I
Right.
think, yeah, it's just very relatable in terms of like physical health, right? You can't just keep working out. Like, you can do cardio, you could lift weights, like you could balance, like keep doing two at both, like switching one and off. But at some point, the recovery is still a massive aspect to how well you perform in the gym, and how well you perform in terms of cardio. So like that recovery is just as important in terms of mental health as it is physical health.
Right. I think many times we may just keep on pushing ourselves to some limits and just say that, no, 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 that's fine. I can keep on going further. But I think, as you said, recovery is key, is something that we all should take into account, especially being at such a prestigious institution like yourself. I think one of the biggest things that we can take into account as adolescents, especially, is the idea of listening to ourselves and knowing our limits. Many times we'd be so caught up in what others are doing around us and wanting to catch up to them that we'll neglect our own bodies, our own minds. And sometimes we just have to take a step back and say, okay, you know what? Tonight I'm not going to go out with my friends. I'm just going to take it easy, watch a Netflix show, catch up on rest. So I think
Yeah.
that's definitely great for your mental health as well. So before we transition a little bit before your career at Princeton, I wanted to touch on Birdies Towards Brightness. So could you expand a little bit for our viewers out there what your goal? I know you talked about it, and I talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but what your goal was towards creating that sort of organization, and then how we can contribute to it as well.
Yeah. So Birdies Towards Brightness is a fundraiser more than anything else. We've raised more than $3,300 already, and it's been awesome. And most of that happened over the Princeton Women's Invitational that happened during like late uh, or like mid September, earlier this fall. And so most of the donations came in from that. And my goal is basically with Birdies Towards Brightness is that we'll have a bunch of donors like pledge how much money they're willing to donate for every birdie that the Princeton men's and women's golf teams make during the competition. And like, well, we've already had a few people pledge like, oh, I'll donate $1 per birdie, which is actually a lot of money considering how many tournaments that we play, and then you have 5 players per on each team, and it racks up. So like, that's pretty much the goal, and then all of that money is donated to NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, that you've done a lot of work for, and I've had some experience with them as well, and they're just a phenomenal foundation and organization, and they'll put that money to very good use. So just just having that money go to them, and then having professionals deal with it is something that's very soothing for me, for my mind. But obviously there's more things that we need to do on campus that could be accomplished.
And thank you so much for taking an initiative like that. I know it means a lot just to have the fundraiser like that, and it takes a lot of guts, to go out and do the initiative like that. So I imagine like many people who are donating must be feeling really good that their money is being put to good use. So thanks for
Yeah, for
that.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think another thing that we're also doing is so I'm taking this class, not really a class, it's just kind of more of a extracurricular, but also counts as a class at Princeton. It's called Epics, where you can build whatever you want to. Like, it's pretty much a woodshop class, but you can
Oh,
build
wow.
whatever you want to. So a bunch of guys on the lax team are like building cornhole sets, and then
Oh,
so I got a couple of the guys on the golf team, and we're in the class together, and we're actually embroidering hats with our logo, our Birdies
oh,
Towards
wow.
Brightness logo on it. And all of this funded by the school. Like, we each have a budget of $75 each, so we'll probably get a bunch of really cheap hats.
Very cool.
So we're still learning how to use the embroidery machine, but once that happens, we'll be selling those, and all of the profit will be going to Birdies Towards Brightness and to NAMI, which is going to be super fun.
Awesome. Yeah, let me know when those hats
Yeah,
come out. I'd love one.
yeah, for sure. Well, we have merch dropping.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for that. So it sounds like, your career at Princeton is going off to a great start, and I wish you the best of luck for that. So if it's okay with you, since most of our viewers are in high school, and then this podcast is primarily targeted towards adolescents, can we talk about a little bit about your high school experience and what mental health was like at at a competitive boarding school?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've definitely like ignored it a lot and throughout high school just because like there are so many other people doing more than me, or, like they're doing clubs, they're doing school, like they're doing sports. Like I have no excuse. So that was definitely kind of the mindset that I had in in high school, all throughout high school, and obviously it's caught up to me.
Mhm.
That way of thinking, and it's just not very healthy at all. It just you don't live a very happy life, which is kind of the number one priority. I think especially for high school seniors, like with college
Oh,
applications and
yes.
everything going on, it's like, oh, how can I find a way to maximize my time to do more? And yeah, while that's like cool, like you have more things on the resume, like you have more extracurriculars you're doing, but you need to do that without sacrificing your own health and your own well-being first and foremost. And because at the end of the day, you only have yourself. And you're gonna be the only person rooting for yourself at the end of the day. So if you kind of run yourself into the ground, you don't have much left. So, yeah, my experience with mental health in high school was very much like that, and kind of ran myself into the ground. And although it was a little easier than in college, just because I never really competed during the school year. There weren't that many tournaments that were going on during the school year either. So during the school when I'm in school, I can focus on my classes and purely that. I didn't do too many extracurriculars in high school. I was part of SO. I was co-head of SO golf with um, one of my fellow co-head, Eunice Kim, who's playing golf at UPenn, which is awesome. And so like just I it was very like focused on school, and I think that was able to help me. Not having to juggle so many things like I do now in college. It's definitely nice, but I think it was always, how can I do better in class? And because I'm not the brightest guy on the planet, like I work really hard, and that's pretty much how I succeed. Is I just out try and outwork everyone else because it might take me 30 minutes to get this math problem. Well, it may take other people to get 10, but I'm going to spend 30 minutes on this math problem. And so just like working hard is definitely a very good attribute, but you need to work hard without sacrificing your own well-being is the main is the main point here.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for those insights. And I think something that's really, really great about what you said is going back to the idea what we were talking about earlier is, focusing on yourself and understanding that point of like burnout. So I understand, being at Exeter, you must have felt many points, especially like during finals week and during midterms, where you're just like, all right, I can't take this anymore. And what were you like what were like your avenues of like de-stressing, I guess?
Yeah, I think because golf was not as competitive during the school year, like
Mhm.
just going and hitting a few golf balls, or like doing something active was very stress relieving for me. And
Sure.
I found the gym was very helpful. Like I found a few guys in the gym, and we would always work out in the morning, and that was super fun. But I think the number one thing is just understanding how much time things are going to take, and just blocking things off well. Like I was, still am a very stickler for my schedule. So like I'll block off things, very like I'll time block everything. And that's been really helpful for me. It's like understanding at this moment in time, there's always a purpose to my time. And that feels relieving for me.
Mhm.
I don't know if it does for other people, but definitely like at this moment in time, like I know I have to do this, and this is something that needs to get done. It gives me a purpose to every step that I take, and I think that's very nice. Just like when you're having fun with your friends, go fully have fun with your friends instead of like, oh, I got this paper that needs to get
Yeah.
done, like you got to do things 100%. And that's been really helpful.
Gotcha. That's definitely something that takes a lot of practice. And I try my best to do that as well. Like while I'll be out to dinner with my friends, it'll always be in the back of my mind that I'm procrastinating on a paper that I have to do the next day. But well, thank you so much for those insights. And before we wrap up this podcast, just wanted to touch on some brief kind of wrap up questions. So how would you tell other adolescents to deal with the stigma that might be associated with seeking out guidance for their mental health concerns?
I think the number one thing is, it's not, um, it's not that big of a deal to go seek help. And it's much better that you seek help than kind of bottle it up by yourself, because this is something that affects so many people. And it's normal to kind of be overwhelmed with your feelings. You're a high school kid, you're just early on a young adult, like in college. Like we're not supposed to be able to process all of these things. Like we're still so young, and talking to someone and understanding those feelings and taking time to understand those feelings is much, much better than just kind of suppressing it and making sure that I do more, like, to become traditionally successful, because none of that really matters if you're, not doing great health wise. It doesn't really matter anymore. And so I think that's the biggest thing that we need to focus on, is how important this is to our actual well-being. Because it's like, oh, it's mental health, like whatever, I'll just sleep it off and then tomorrow will be good. But those moments add up, and they'll pile up, and it'll be it gets really overwhelming. And the next thing you know, you don't know how to deal with anything. You're panicking about all sorts of stuff, and in the end it's very counterproductive. So I think just the number one thing is just to go find help when you feel overwhelmed in the first place. Go talk to someone, especially professional. They'll help you understand your feelings better and help you process it. And it's much better than having a bunch of stuff that you don't know how to deal with, and trying to suppress it. So
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for your insights today. They really meant a lot to me personally, as I grow as a learner and as a student, as a person, and start entering college as well. So yeah, again, thank you so much for your time. And was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
yeah, I think it's just, I've said it a bunch. I feel like I'm a broken record, but it's much better to say it more times than not. I think it's just seek help when you need it, and that's the most important thing, because you're dealing with something that you don't know, and there's no shame in seeking help. Like it's the same thing you do it for school. Like if I have a problem that I don't know how to solve, like I'm gonna go ask my teacher about it. I'm gonna go ask my professor, or go ask somebody that knows how to deal with it. It's no different than anything else. Like you wouldn't try and cure like some sickness that you got. You wouldn't try and cure your mono. If you had mono, right, you would go see a doctor about that. And it's the exact same thing. And um, it's something that's super, super beneficial, and will help especially in the long run.
Gotcha. To all those viewers out there, really take Will's advice and try to implement that in your daily lives, and you'll see many, many vast range of differences in seeking help, and eventually it'll help eradicate the stigma that exists with mental health. So, Will, we
For
wish you
sure.
best of luck with your career, and thank you so much for your time on today's podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. It was wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much.